Let's go across to the Finance Minister, Mr. Arun Jaitley, as he's briefing the press.
Came from a background which reflected historically the disadvantaged groups in India. He grew up amidst all odds and turned out to be one of the extremely brilliant diplomats that India produced, and eventually went on to become the President of India. On a personal note, I happened to work closely with him when he was the President because I was sworn in as a minister by him for the first time. And as a law minister in the government at that time, I had to deal with the President quite regularly. And an extremely sharp mind, a strict constitutionalist, given to rules, good governance, good principles. That's the memory of Dr. K. Narayanan that we all have. And I am indeed privileged to join the list of some very eminent people who in the past have delivered his annual oration itself. I was asked by the university to send a written text of the address, which of course Professor Jha would need for reasons of publishing. But I've always believed that listening to people read out text becomes quite challenging. And therefore, I'm not really going to read it out, but refer to some of the basic points which are set out in the text itself. While we speak in terms of reform and growth in India, a lot seems to have happened in the last 2.5 decades. In fact, the Chancellor in his various capacities as a former foreign minister and even otherwise was mentioning that he's traveled extensively to India, and his initial memories seem to be of the 1968 Indian train, traveling in what was then called the third-class compartment. We've come a long way since then. He did mention my fondness for cricket. And if I go back to where India was in those decades, in Steve Waugh's autobiography, when he first made his debut in cricket, he came to India in 1987 to play in the World Cup. And from Mumbai, he mentions in his autobiography that he would regularly telephone his girlfriend. Because of Indian economy doing well, where do we feel we can do better? I think there are 3 or 4 variables. The first variable, of course, is the global tailwinds. Today, the global situation is obstructive to very high rates of growth. For one, our exports are very adequate, are significantly impacted because global trade itself has shrunk, and therefore, in terms of values, it has shrunk because of the oil prices and the commodity prices. Even if volumes remain the same, in value term, it seems to have shrunk, and therefore, the global situation has adversely impacted on our exports. That is one area of serious challenge that we have. We've had 2 years of bad monsoon. Fortunately, in Indian history, you've never had 3 bad monsoons in a row. So on the law of probability, we keep our fingers crossed this year. And monsoons, we don't have a food crisis ever in India because we have surplus, but it impacts on the purchasing power of the rural population. And therefore, it has a spiral impact on industry, on manufacturing, on demand in the market itself. So that's an important variable which can add to India's growth itself. Third, of course, is our ability to continue with the reform process and adding to its pace. And the fourth, which is something which hasn't helped the rest of the world, but it has helped us. The low oil prices, particularly the low commodity prices, have helped us because we are net buyers. And therefore, we've been able to save a lot of money on account of particularly the fall in the oil prices and divert that resource into more useful areas of operation. How do I see the reforms continuing in India? I think India still has a great appetite for reforms. There is a clear realization in India that India, post the 1990s, is a much better country to live in. It's doing much better than it was prior to that. And therefore, there is a larger political consensus that governments, both at the center and the states, continuing with reforms.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.